Good morning and welcome to SimWorld today, January 2nd edition. I am Marsh, joined on this Thursday by the man in the stands. I don't know what that means, but it's Siege. What's up, Siege? How you doing, man?
Doing well. Good morning. How we doing? Excited for Thursday, Favorite day of the week,
Hey,
actually.
you know what, Siege? 100% right there with you. Thursday, hands down, the best day of the week. I will not hear an argument otherwise because that argument is incorrect. We got plenty to argue about, I'm sure. So we're gonna jump right in. We got some SimWorld U. We had a huge day in SimWorld U. Some potential hot seats stirring up. Let's start in college football, where we had two of our quarterfinal games: the Rose Bowl and the Peach Bowl. One a double overtime thriller. One was over at the half. This is now a trend, Siege, where we've actually really had one, I would say, game of this college football playoff as it's expanded to 12 teams that's really been worth tuning into. And that, of course, was the Arizona State game yesterday. Every other game has pretty much been decided before before the final whistle. So, Siege, is the seeding broken in college football right now?
That simply does seem so. You could say broken. You could say that it's a work in progress. I know it's the first year, but yeah, it's broken. I mean, right now you've got two of those teams that got blown out were very much so like the top seeds. Boise State should never have been the three seed in my opinion. Just shouldn't have happened. That I get the whole conference thing. That's what we're doing. Oregon. I mean, that was just a good old fashioned surprise blowout there. I mean, I don't. They should have been number one. And they got blown out. Arizona State's the only seed who got that bye so far, who has seemed to actually put up a fight, but they still lost. The only team left they got a bye that could possibly win and be a saving grace here is Georgia. So yeah, it seems broken. It seems like some editing needs to be done of the way that these teams are positioned come playoff time.
I'm going to disagree with you, Siege, and here's why. I think we have a tendency, we being people, have a tendency when something new comes out, we immediately want to trash it. We want to, and I'm not saying trashing it, but we want to be aggressive against it, and we want to say all the things that are bad with it. Let's go back to 2015. Why did I choose 2015? I don't know. I just did. I went that far back, and I didn't feel like opening up any more tabs on my computer. College football playoff games since 2015. How about the Oregon beatdown of Florida State, 59-20 in the semifinal, leading up to the Ohio State beatdown of Oregon, 42-20 in the national championship in 2015? How about 2016? Clemson beats Oklahoma by 20. Alabama beats Michigan State 38-0. 2017, 31-0 win for Clemson over Ohio State in the semifinal. Alabama beats Washington 24-7, a game that really wasn't all that competitive. Washington couldn't move the ball. Let's keep on moving to 2018, where we had two overtime games, but of course Alabama beats Clemson 24-6 in the first round. I'm going to keep going just a touch to make my point. 24-16, 2019 national championship game for Clemson over Alabama. That is after a 20-3 win over 30-3 win over Notre Dame, and then the 63-28 blowout LSU does in 2020, and then a 42-25 win over Clemson in the semifinals. I can continue, but I don't want to take up our entire show listing scores. This is what happens in college sports. We are always going to get blowouts. And so I think we're going to look, and you're going to hear a lot of people talking about it. You're going to hear a lot of people saying this is not good football and that Boise State shouldn't have been there. They're going to be very quiet and mum on Arizona State, who should have won that game. They had a 4th and 13, and they gave up the touchdown in overtime. That is what we are going to be staring down, and I think it's wrong because that's what college sports is. College sports is constant blowouts. There is a very small group of teams at the very, very top that are always dominant, and there's this team that's right below them that pretty much always hang around and are good, maybe not great, and then you got the teams that every now and then will jump up into that. The Washingtons of the last couple of years, the Arizona States of this season. This is what happens in college football. So we're going to hear a lot of people saying we don't need 12 teams. You're also going to hear a lot of people saying, well, we need to add more teams because Alabama, who just lost to Michigan, should have been in there, and South Carolina, who just lost to Illinois, should have been in there. But it doesn't matter because college football is always going to have blowouts. We're not going to get good football games every single time. Even if we have 12, if we have 25 teams, it's not going to matter. Blowouts happen. It's part of sports. Could be college, could be professional because the SWFL is no stranger to blowouts in the postseason, Siege.
Sure, absolutely. You know what I mean. You mentioned a lot of blowouts there, but if you go and look at those blowouts, and maybe I'm wrong here. Most of those blowouts, the better seeded team was the team doing the blowing out. You mentioned a lot of those Alabama blowouts. They were the higher seed in most of those. Not all of them. Not all of them. Some of them, you're right. When we talk about seeding, we also now have 12 teams, right? You got 12 teams, and some of them got a bye. So my whole thing is that, look, of course, those teams deserve to be there. Alabama shouldn't have been there. I'll tell you that right now. I was in person at that bowl game. They lost to Michigan. We didn't deserve to be anywhere. Terrible, terrible stuff. But all I'm saying is if you kind of reverse the roles a little, right? Now, let's say that first round game wasn't Penn State SMU, but that first round game was Penn State or Boise State SMU. Maybe at least we get a competitive game before one of them gets blown out by Penn State. So for me, it's not about what teams are in there. I don't think it needs to be expanded at all. Absolutely not. Let's not do that. And I don't think anything like that. I think this whole idea of the best conference champions get in, sure, but the best conference champions automatically getting those top seeds and getting a bye. That's where I think maybe there could be some editing. Maybe you get in the playoff and then it's merit based. It's eye test based, whatever seeding. But whatever you do, you're right. People are going to have an issue with it, right? You could make any kind of format and someone's going to complain. But for me, if I can get a couple more competitive games here through the first 2 rounds of this, I'd be happy. I'd be happy. Of course, there's no way to confirm that they will be more competitive. But so far, like you said, we've gotten one competitive game really. And that's I just want to see some competitive football. I just want to see them. I just want to see the boys play ball.
On that point, I will agree with you. And the irony of all of this is that one of the biggest blowouts was handing the number one only undefeated team in college football a 34-0 deficit at halftime. So for anyone that's going to be upset about blowouts, that is the exact reason why you can't just be like, well, Boise State shouldn't have been in there. Boise State had a great game. They just turned the ball over too much and could not have done there. But I agree with you. The seeding, a little broken. Do we really need buys to conference wins? I knew where they were coming from because they were thinking old school. Boy, like Big Ten champ is normally like 5th ranked. SEC champ is normally like the 3rd ranked team. The ACC champ has typically been Clemson, and they're like the number 3 ranked team in the country. Didn't happen this year. Bad year in a very redone college football landscape. All right, let's keep it rolling to some college basketball, where we have conference play on the horizon, pretty much 2 weeks away, about 19 days. January 21st, I believe, if my memory serves me, which could be wrong, but it's in that ballpark. Conference play will begin. So, Siege, as we start staring down conference play and meaningful basketball, who is best positioned in their conference to take on and roll through a potential conference championship?
Meaningful basketball. That's what we live for. That's what we live for. I'll tell you, the first team I think that's poised incredibly well is San Diego State. Let's talk about the Mountain West, huh? Nobody wants to talk about the Mountain West. It's not a pretty conference. Mountain West is the conference that you end up bringing home to your parents, not the conference that you spend all your time with in college. But you end up bringing the Mountain West home. Let's talk about the Mountain West, right? 7-2. They look great. They're 2 losses. They're 2 losses. The only team, there's Gonzaga, New Mexico, St. Mary's, UNLV, all right behind them. I think San Diego State's poisoned themselves to actually give themselves a chance to win the Mountain West Conference, in my opinion. But the other team for me that by far has poised themselves ahead of the crowd right now is actually Georgetown. I think Georgetown looks really good in another very good conference. Butler's the only team I see giving them a run for the money in the Big East. So those are my picks at the moment of the best poised teams to do something in their conference.
I'm going to go, I love the Mountain West pick because that has not been the way we've thought it was going. And I think the 2 conferences that you mentioned have 2 teams that we have expected to traditionally be very good. And this season they've been good and then they've been mediocre on very different days, right? UConn. 2 straight national championship game appearances have not looked, and they lost last night, have not looked like the UConn that we've expected. Gonzaga, a team that traditionally motored their way through a abysmal Western Coast Conference or West Coast Conference. Now they make a move up, and they have not looked a much tougher non-conference schedule this season. They have not looked like they could be there, and that's why those 2 doors are wide open. The team that I actually think might be best positioned is Memphis in the American Conference. They are currently 11-7. They've won 3 straight games, number 13 in the country. You're going to look at that, and you're going to see a worse record than Princeton, a worse record than Davidson, and because SMU had that early conference game against Jackson State, they're staring up at SMU currently on the standings. But I love the way Memphis is playing because in their losses, they've been competitive. They have, since an early season struggle, they have been a great basketball team consistently. Now, have they gotten the wins every single time? No, they have not. But when you're looking at 1 to 2 possession basketball games and they're not always going your way, I don't personally believe, and I've said this many times about 1 to 2 point losses, I don't buy them in terms of like big thumbs down on them. I think this is a team that's playing consistent, and that's what you really need come conference play. You don't need to be dominant. You don't need to be, the Iowas of the world who are consistent, but they're scoring 90 points per game. You just need to be consistently in every single game. That's what UConn has not
That doesn't
been.
hurt.
That's what
That doesn't hurt. 90 points.
It doesn't hurt to be scoring 90 points per game. And Iowa has been playing consistent basketball. But when you look at the track record and you can say, I feel confident that Team X is going to come out and it's going to be a close game. They're going to be winning basketball games, and they're going to either be in them in the final 3 minutes when you've really got to be in a basketball game. That's what Memphis is doing. I don't know that that's necessarily the case with the rest of their conference. Because, yeah, you want to look around the other Power 5 or Power 4 conferences. Duke, Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech, I think that one, all the other conferences are pretty much wide open. Texas, Kansas, I think Texas is probably the most well-positioned there. But every other conference has a little bit of that secondary team that might be running with them. I just really like what Memphis has done since their early season struggles and their most recent win streak to get back above 500 and into the top 15.
Yeah, I mean, Memphis got a really talented roster that's consistent when you got a guy like Darius Outlaw, who we talked about a lot to start the season, and nobody's really been talking about him recently. But I think what's been happening is he actually has been scoring less a lot recently. He's been finding a way to get his teammates more involved, specifically the big men. If you look at the scoring averages for his big men through their first, 8-9 games, versus through their second 8-9 games, you're going to see a big uptick in the big man production of that Memphis squad. And I think that's going to help poise them for that consistency that you talk about. Easy shots inside, high percentage shots. That's what Memphis has been trending towards. And I think that's going to serve them well.
It sure will. Would really serve a head coach right now well are wins, and those have been hard to come by for Houston, who have dropped to 4-5 after 2 straight losses. Aji Feshbenle has moved to the bench after a really tough start to his second season in Houston. And there's some rumors, there's been some conversation that Kelvin Sampson might choose to step down at the end of the season. That maybe the hot seat's a little warm if you want to read into that the other way. So Siege, is the seat warm in Houston, and should it be getting hotter for head coach Kelvin Sampson after a second straight, pretty disappointing start to the regular season?
I think it's warm. I'm not so sure that it's hot yet, so to say. But I think it's getting there. I think last night's loss on national TV to a big time struggling Virginia team. That wasn't a Virginia team that's a normal Virginia team. That's a team that's struggling. They got a good squad, but they're struggling, and they didn't look great, right? I mean, they looked okay. They made it a game for a lot of the game, but towards the end of the game, they didn't know what to do. And this is way too talented a roster to be sitting where they are record-wise right now. Kelvin Sampson's an absolute legend, and you got to start thinking maybe this is not going to work out right now. So that's why I say warm. I don't think it's hot yet because I think Kelvin Sampson's earned himself a little more leeway and a little more time. So I don't know if that's after this season, but I think if next season comes around and they didn't do anything this year and he's not doing anything at the beginning of next year as well, you're going to see him be on the hot seat quick, and they're going to make a change quick.
Yeah, this is a tough team because on its surface, it's a second straight season of which you feel really great about the recruiting class. Kola Abdul Rauf was a great addition to this team. Abraham Kasango as well. This is a group that you expected, and that comes after you get the recruiting classes of Freddie Stonewall, Carl Holmes, of course, Aji Feshbenle. The season before that, Carl Holmes expected to be a lottery pick. But what this team really lacks is an offensive fulcrum. And Carl Holmes, I know, he's averaging 23 points per game, but if you look across the country, you either need to be a big man equivalent to Lamarian Sherwood and Jamison Johnson, or you need a wing that can really get downhill and score points. And Carl Holmes is like a Jamison Johnson light. He's good, but he's not quite as dominant and unstoppable as Sherwood and Johnson are. But you don't have that equivalent offensive wing attacker, and that's what you have in a place like Jamison Johnson's situation in Kentucky, where you've got Glory Tate, who you have this inside-outside combination. I don't think that Houston has that because this team is actually pretty decent defensively. They give up 68 points per game. It's top 25. It's really the best part of their game. but they don't shoot the ball well. They're 68th in field goal percentage from the floor. They're, excuse me, 69th, excuse me, in free throw. They are top 15 in field goal percentage, but then they're 48th in 3-point percentage, shooting under 30%. So they're great field goal because Sir Carl Holmes is in the paint, just cooking it up at 63% from the floor because he's an unstoppable force, but you don't have the ancillary threat on the outside. Just one guy who's shooting reliably over 30% from deep, which is not something that necessarily brings success. So I think this Houston team, I don't know if it's Kelvin Sampson's fault, but I think it's just finding a guy on the outside that can be a reliable shot maker for you. I don't think Siege that Houston has done that. I think that's why this team is staring at this inconsistency, because you say, hey, we're going to be in games defensively, but we've got no one to go to down the stretch that's going to be able to score the bucket, put the ball in the rack, and in a game in which you need to score points, and a lot of times you need to score 3 points, they can't do that.
So it's roster composition and not coaching is what I'm hearing.
It's roster composition that maybe these guys haven't panned out. I mean, Freddie Stonewall, I think, is really good, but he's shooting 34% from deep. Aji Feshbenle was a really good playmaking wing during his high school days, and we haven't seen him be that same type of dominant downhill threat in college basketball. I just think it's a team that said we need scoring, and they have not found it from either guys they thought they could, or they haven't opened up the gates and allowed some of these guys to really be successful on the ball.
See, that's where I lean more, because like you just said, Fagbenle and some of these other guys proved of the scoring they could do and the kind of scoring they could do. Like we've seen it from them. And yes, it's different doing it at the prep level as it is doing it at the college level. We know that. But still, and so for me, you got to lean towards they're not being put in the right position to do so. They didn't just lose their basketball talent overnight. This isn't Space Jam. So like they absolutely can do those things. I'm wondering where it's coming from. If it's team cohesion, maybe there's locker room issues, but whatever it is, that's a coach's job to fix. A coach has got to be on top of that. They got to be put in those positions to do those things. And right now, I'm not seeing that happening.
Yeah, they've got 2 guys right now that I think if you talk to any scout, you say, okay, that's a 3-point shooter. Those 2 guys are Parham Kirkpatrick, who leads the team in 3-point percentage, 42.9, except he's made 9 of them. The other is Freddie Stonewall, who leads the team with 16 made 3-pointers. He's shooting 34%. They have one dude, Freddie Stonewall, on the entire roster, 9 games in, that has double-digit 3-pointers made. You're not going to win basketball games if you can't shoot the basketball, because it makes life even harder for Carl Holmes, because defense can just say, we're not worried about them. We're going to stop the big guy in the middle. He's a power forward, but he's cooking inside. He's an athletic downhill threat. You need shooting to open up the floor. I think that's the biggest problem for Houston. Yep. So if Sampson's going to stick around, I think it's a matter of we've got to bring in the talent. Maybe it's not a number 1 recruit that everybody loves, but it's a guy that actually complements this roster, that can shoot the basketball, that can get things rolling. All right, let's get this rolling to a very big day in SimWorld U for our wrap-up. So let's roll the tape and let's dive on in to the day that was on New Year's Day in SimWorld U. We kick things off, or we tip things off, with a Syracuse loss. Again, they fall to 0-11, this one at the hands of Kansas State. It's Roscoe Scarlett with 18 points to keep the Syracuse Orange winless in the win column. Still the only team in college basketball without a win. They are 0-11. Kansas State moves to 9-7 on the season. Head to Villanova. They get a win over UNLV. Freshly top 25 minted. Justin Bell leads the way with 19 points. 4 players in double-figure scoring for Villanova. Jamarius Lipman, Aaron Lovejoy with 14 apiece, 17 from Nat Hawkins in a very successful day for UNLV's budding star. And UNLV, again, 21 ranked. They're trying to move their way up the rankings, starting to get rolling as Big East play looms for the Wildcats. Justin Bell has been the fantastic fulcrum of that offense. Head on over to Georgetown and Harvard. A little smart man college basketball action. Let me just finish off our highlights of UNLV there, or Villanova there for you. Number 11, Georgetown rules 70-44. An absolutely stifling defensive day. Harvard held to 31% from the floor. Only one player, Kyrie Vogler, is in double figures for Harvard. Jay Laster paces Georgetown 19-8 15-7-4 from Atlee Backman, and Georgetown moves to 9-1 on the season. The team Siege mentioned as a potential leader of the Big East. St. John's hosts Illinois. They get a big win there. The Johnnies do. It's Jared Quinney leading the way in what turned out to be a full team but defensive effort. St. John's shoots 29% from the floor. They force 9 turnovers. They pull in 9 offensive boards. It's enough to get a win over Illinois. D'Angelo Jordan leads the way for Illinois with 17 points and 12 boards for that squad. UConn, they can't get a home win against Wichita State, 73-64. Wichita State's Leonidas Wright leads the way with 21 points, 10 boards from Deonta Mink for the Shockers. Fareed Redmond is the only guy that really got things rolling along with Booba Morgan for UConn, but their defense could not slow this team down. Wichita State shoots 54% from the floor. VCU and Maryland have a late free throws from one Cooper Kingy Cross on a big night from him, 21 points, 6 assists for CKC. Makes just one free throw. That's the one that puts them over the top as Maryland, number 19 in the country, moves to 5-1 on the season. Maverick Jackson Jones for VCU leading the VCU Rams with 19 points in the defeat. They're now 4-6. Davidson, they just had a New Year's Day or New Year's Eve matchup in Miami. They have to then go home and play again, and they suffer this one. 50-47 loss. They looked exhausted. They shoot just 35%. They go 2 of 22 from deep in a 3-point loss. It's Richard Pizarski, 19-9, the player of the week just a couple weeks ago. Davidson gets the loss. They fall to 7-4. Lorenzo Phenom returns in just 2 minutes. UVA, you talked about this one. Houston falling to Virginia, 69-59. Johnny Baldwin a double-double, 14-10. Carl Holmes, 29 points. He's the only Houston Cougar that shot above 50% on any type of volume, and the only guy in double figures in the loss. Good defensive effort for Houston. Terrible offensive one. They end up with just 59 points. Again, they fall to 4-5 on the year. How about Wake Forest trying to take down number 7 Iowa? Those dreams were well-intentioned but poorly executed. 84-52 win for Iowa. No stopping Lamarian Sherwood's 32-11. He goes 16 for 16 from the floor. Wake Forest at one point, that bench laughing and joking around as they fall to 2-13 in a very disappointing second half. They scored just 18 points in the loss. St. Mary's and Jackson State. Jackson State, no answer. 95-55 win for the Gales. They score 53 points in the first half, a 53-14 dominant first half. Kai Newby and Adel Elledge, 16 points apiece. Brandon Romaine, a double-double. 5 St. Mary's players finish with 10 points or more. D. Woodley, 16 points on the game. Head out to the West Coast, where Boise State continues their slow start, a 65-59 defeat to Richmond. Richmond is led by Francisco Fortunato, 18 points. Braylon Lash, 16 points, 3 assists, 3 steals. Nevada held quiet over the last minute, no points as Princeton gets a win, 78-73. The Tigers move to 6-1 on the season. Alika Matson with 21-10. Tyshawn Penn with 20-8 for Princeton as they're trying to dark horse their way into the American Conference. Marcellus Blow led Nevada with 23 points in the defeat. And then San Diego State, you saw this one at the second half of our doubleheader on SimWorld TV last night. A 68-61 rally back win for the Aztecs. 20 points from Jode Platts, 3 assists as well for San Diego State. Moved to 7-2, and it's Milan McCabe, 13-6 for Xavier. A tough road trip for Xavier at UCLA, and then at San Diego State. Had to move the UCLA game because of scheduling conflicts back in Cincinnati. But hey, again, who doesn't mind spending New Year's in Southern California as opposed to Ohio? I might take Southern California, but they come away 0-2 on that one as San Diego State gets a win last night. Said it was a lot of games. That is a lot to talk about. We've got more to talk about tomorrow because we got the more basketball coming to you here on a Thursday. We got the ESPN matchup, Maryland and UConn, coming up at 8 p.m., and then New Mexico and Jackson State at 9:30. We'll recap both of those. We'll dive into more college hoops. We've got the Sugar Bowl today coming up, so we'll recap that one. And we've got some football on the horizon in the SWFL as we approach the final week of the regular season. Hey, no Saquon Barkley going for the all-time rushing championship, Siege. I don't know how I feel about that. Let him go. He says he's at peace with it. I call BS. Let the man cook. He's been fantastic this season. That's our show. Siege, great as always to see you. Appreciate you jumping on. Sorry about your tide not rolling at all, but stumbling and falling down to the Michigan Wolverines. But we appreciate you joining us this morning. We're excited to have you on anytime you ever want to wake up and join the show. Appreciate you all tuning in on SimWorld TV here in SimWorld, the only place you can see the game, be the game.